6 cybersecurity lessons learned from 2020, and much more.
So Tony, you've got a list here relating to 6 things that cybersecurity professionals have learned in 2020. I'd love to know what those 6 things are.
Oh, thank you, Matt. So yeah, I was reading this article on dark reading, and the headline caught my eyes. And being in cybersecurity, I wanted to see how close it was with things that I've heard within our community or experienced. So I thought it was a really good article. They did list 6 things. Obviously, that's not going to be a full list. I'm sure our viewers or us here can come up with a lot more. But I did think that these were very pertinent. So the first one is SOC is required, had required recalibration, which makes a lot of sense. Most SOCs are, they're a close-knit group, typically in a room or in a couple buildings, but they communicate a lot. So one of the hurdles or lessons learned was when you have to take an environment that's close-knit, where they're constantly doing a collab, they're communicating with each other, and then making everyone kind of disperse. They did see a lot of challenges. There was a couple surveys that this article had. Working from home, being part of a SOC, the breakdown in some of their collaboration. Sometimes the tools that they use didn't really stretch outside into a work from home environment. So that was definitely one of the lessons learned. Some companies that had SOCs had to do a quick shuffle, had to work on a couple things, but definitely would help make sure that those organizations were able to flex, stretch during any sort of environment, which is actually one of the other items that I'm kind of leading to, but I won't get to that one till later. Number 2 was choose your own IT. The title of this section to me was a little off. But basically what they were saying was taking a environment where the employees are now outside of their network. Maybe they're working on endpoints that aren't necessarily assets of your company, or now you're using new collaboration tools, web meetings, whatever that case is, where data could actually be produced and outside of your control. So one thing that they brought up is you need to really focus on not necessarily securing your endpoints, but securing the data while it's moving around. Because with this new environment where everyone is not in an office space, you really have to secure the transit, secure the destination in a way, maybe encryption, something that prevents it from really getting outside of your company's network. Another one that they came up with, number 3, was SaaS as an attack surface. So, you have to now move everyone out. You have to communicate, so cloud-based environments, securing APIs. There's definitely a way that these companies had to quickly evolve and move to securing these sorts of transit points, ways that their employees were communicating. And number 4, which I thought was fantastic, was the zero trust model. Some companies may not be looking into it, but after 2020, I'm sure that if they're not either implementing it now or it's definitely on their schedule. And, with the zero trust model, making sure that all authentication from any user is fully vetted, whether you're in the enterprise network or you're outside of the enterprise network, but making sure that, anytime an authentication occurs, it is completely and fully vetted. It's not a trust model, hence the zero trust. Number 5, you had just talked about it on on your segment here was ransomware's on a rise. This article basically stated it's not new, which is obvious. But because of the way people are working this year alone, the ability to hit endpoints with ransomware has really increased. And it's again goes back to the choose your own IT. The assets that your employees may be using aren't necessarily fully under the company's control. And then, you get a ransomware attack going into those different vectors, and you could easily move its way around. So ransomware was definitely on the rise this year, which is very disheartening. We talked about that in your segment. But the last one made a lot of sense, and that is non-security events are impacting security. So basically 2020 in general has completely impacted the way that security is working. You now have to worry about not just having everyone in one location, but now they're in, if it's a company of 100 or 200 locations trying to get in. So it has completely changed the way that security professionals have to look at an enterprise, at a company, and how to secure all the different aspects that deals with any employee working on any resource or touching any data is now just been a big change, because this was not a security threat. It was a human threat, and that changed the way security professionals had to work. So we're going to see this. It's always going to be there whenever there's natural disasters or things like that. But those are mainly centralized. A hurricane coming in and hitting a couple states, or an earthquake. But what COVID taught us was it's now not just localized, it is global. So that's what the article contained. I thought that the 6 were very good. And I know that, we could probably come up with a couple more lessons learned as well. But I thought this was definitely an interesting read. Everyone should take a poke at it. Maybe, security professionals out there may not have thought about zero trust at this time, and you probably should. So, yeah, it was a good article.
You mentioned coming up with our own, and one of the ones that I think about when I think about COVID is that process changes are an opportunity for social engineering. So many companies were forced to go to VPN or some other remote solution of some kind, and so many people were doing it for the very first time. And there were some phishing campaigns that took advantage of that and said, "Hey, you need to get onto the VPN. Here's your new access login. Just type in your username and password here." Well, yeah. I mean, if people don't know what the official process is, because everything is new, then they're a little bit vulnerable at that point. So I think clear messaging of what the new process is and in a way that can be verified is great, so that people aren't getting random emails or, who knows, text messages about those same processes from attackers.
I think that's a fantastic idea. Just changing the communication process across your corporation to ensure if you're using X, this is how you use X, instead of relying on maybe email or something else.
But yeah,
definitely processes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially when companies are trying to adopt this zero trust policy, I think about the small companies that are probably just starting, the startups. They probably have a real difficult time with implementing this new security infrastructure, even if they're not, especially if they're not like a software-based company or a cybersecurity-based company. They may not have even thought of getting VPN hosts and adding security awareness to their employee, or sending out security awareness information and trying to prevent phishing campaigns. So I think to reiterate what you and Tony said, Matt, I think the operations are really important, and the processes of trying to get to a secure infrastructure in this time with the pandemic and a remote workforce.
Very good, Chris. I think these are all great ideas. I got a small one. It just popped in my head. But one thing that came to mind when I was reading this, and then the idea that I have was starting to grow right here was, I was thinking of how to deal with security controls. But the idea is more along the lines of prevention in what the employee is allowed to do on the assets that they have in their house that is tied to their company. Mm-hmm. And for me, with my background, I am not a fan of accessing webmail on a company asset. If it's your personal webmail, I would prefer you not use it with your asset, and that leads to malware, phishing, or any of those other aspects that come in from that vector. If you have a personal device, check your webmail on that personal device, and try to keep that separate. So, and also if you're using an endpoint at home that maybe is personal, there's got to be ways to try to keep that separate from your work environment. So there's a lot of things that we could probably sit here for an hour and just come up with stuff.
Mm. I agree with you on both of those halves. The separation of the personal and the work environments is kind of important. I mean, people could log in with a machine that's at home and has some sort of infection they've never noticed, and now that infected machine has access to the internals of our network. It's frustrating. I mean, there's ways to do it. I mean, the thing that comes to mind is if you can provide your employees a second asset to do work, day-to-day work, that would be the best. If that's not something you can do, maybe you can provide them some sort of USB-based booting environment where you can teach them how to boot into work. That laptop becomes a work laptop until it gets rebooted. That could also help separate some of it. It's not perfect, but it's certainly better than asking them to use the same laptop that their kids go online, play games, and install who knows what. I mean, I was a kid. I remember installing some dumb stuff to the same machine that you use for work. It's asking for trouble.
Right, and I was in the same boat as you, Matt. The stuff that the silly games that I downloaded when I was younger, I wouldn't let any of that touch any of my systems now.